The arena lights hummed overhead, casting sharp shadows across the obsidian floor. Cadet Mara Chen stood at the center of the ring, hands loose at her sides, while 7 alien cadets formed a slow circle around her. The Corinthian in front flexed his forearms, chitin plates gleaming. The Vexori twins hissed in tandem, their scales rippling with anticipation. Behind her, a falcon cracked his knuckles, each one the size of her fist.
7-1, the Corinthian said, his voice a wet rumble. Surrender now, Earthborn, and we'll make it quick.
Mara tilted her head, a faint smile touching her lips. You really think 7 is enough?
The Galactic Academy of Strategic Excellence sat on a neutral moon orbiting the Carthan system, a sprawling complex of training facilities where species from across known space learned to fight, negotiate, and survive together. Humanity had been admitted only 3 years ago, a probationary membership, some called it. Deathworlders, others whispered, their voices edged with equal parts fear and disdain. Mara had grown used to the whispers. She'd heard them her first day, when she'd walked into orientation wearing standard-issue fatigues while the other cadets wore environment suits or anti-gravity harnesses. She'd heard them during combat drills, when her instructors warned her to hold back so she wouldn't injure her classmates. She'd heard them in the mess hall, where cadets from gentler worlds gave her a wide berth, as if proximity alone might trigger some primal human rage. Today, the whispers had turned to open jeers. The sparring arena was packed. Cadets lined the observation deck, their bioluminescent skin, feathered crests, and crystalline exoskeletons creating a kaleidoscope of colors under the harsh lights. At the center of it all, Mara faced her opponents. The match had been her idea, a formal challenge issued after weeks of escalating taunts. The Corinthian, Vorak, had been the worst. He'd knocked her tray from her hands 2 days ago, laughing as her meal splattered across the floor. When she'd stood without a word and walked away, he'd called after her, "Coward, typical Earthborn, all bark, no bite." She'd turned then, her voice calm. "Arena, tomorrow, you and anyone else who wants to test that theory." Now, Vorak stood before her, flanked by his crew. The Vexori twins, Selah and Kira, were known for their synchronized strikes. The Thulkin, Gorath, had won 3 consecutive strength tournaments. The others, a spindly Arakthan, a floating Quorum, and a hulking Brenthal, filled out the circle. All of them sneered. All of them saw an easy win. "Last chance, Chen," Vorak said, his mandibles clicking. "Walk away. We don't want to hurt you." Mara rolled her shoulders, feeling the familiar tightness between her blades. Her pulse was steady, her breathing even. She thought of her grandmother, who'd taught her to fight in a crumbling gym in Sao Paulo. She thought of the sparring sessions with her unit back on Earth, where losing meant buying drinks, but winning meant nothing but respect. "I'm not the one who should worry about getting hurt." Vorak lunged first. He was fast, faster than she had expected. His forearms came at her in a blur, each one aiming for a different target: throat, ribs, knee, shoulder. But Mara had already moved. She dropped low, letting his top arms whistle over her head, then drove her elbow into the joint of his lower left arm. Chitin cracked. Vorak howled and stumbled back. The Vexori twins struck next, their movements mirrored. Selah came from the left, Kira from the right, both aiming for her midsection. Mara pivoted, using Vorak's bulk as a shield. Selah's claws scraped harmlessly across his back. Kira overextended, and Mara caught her wrist, twisted, and sent her sprawling into the Arakthan, used his own weight against him, and sent him crashing into the arena wall. The impact left a dent in the reinforced steel. The crowd had gone silent. The Quorum floating overhead, its tendrils crackling with static. Mara grabbed a fallen training staff, hurled it like a javelin. It struck the Quorum's core. The alien shrieked, its levitation faltering. It hit the ground hard, tendrils twitching. The Brenthal hesitated. He was the largest of the group, his thick hide covered in scars. But when Mara turned to face him, her eyes cold and steady, he took a step back. "Anyone else?" she asked. Vorak staggered to his feet, cradling his broken arm. Rage twisted his features. He let out a guttural roar and charged again, reckless now.
Mara sidestepped, grabbed his good arm, and used his momentum to flip him onto his back. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. She knelt beside him, her knee pressing lightly against his chest. "Yield," she said quietly. Vorak's mandibles clicked weakly. "I yield." Mara stood and scanned the arena. The Vexori twins were helping each other up. The Aracthan was still untangling itself. Gorith groaned from the wall. The Koran floated weakly towards the exit. The Brenthal had already left. She walked towards the center of the arena, her boots echoing in the silence. Then she stopped, turned, and looked up at the observation deck. Hundreds of eyes stared back at her, wide, shocked, calculating. "Next time," she said, her voice carrying, "bring more than 7.
The Academy's medical wing was never empty, but tonight it was chaos. Vorak lay on a regeneration slab, his arm encased in a biogel cast. The Vexori twins sat side by side, their scales bruised and dull. Goroth's head was wrapped in bandages. The attending medic, a serene Lyrian with iridescent wings, moved between patients with practiced calm. 7 cadets, she said, her voice lilting with disbelief. Against 1 human, and you're the ones who needed medical attention? Vorak said nothing. His pride was more bruised than his body. Mara, meanwhile, sat in the debriefing room, her hands resting on the table. Across from her, Commander Thalon, a towering Varathian with bronze skin and eyes like molten gold, studied her in silence. The commander's claws tapped a slow rhythm against the desk. "Cadet Chen," Thalon said, finally, his voice a low rumble. "You understand the gravity of what you did. I accepted a challenge, sir, a sanctioned match. You humiliated 7 cadets in front of the entire Academy. They chose to challenge me. I chose to win." Thalon's claws stopped tapping. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You've made enemies today. I made enemies the day I arrived, sir. Today, I just made it official." The commander leaned back in his chair. "The Galactic Council is watching us, cadet. Humanity's probationary status means we walk a fine line. Every action reflects on your species. Do you understand that? I do, sir. And yet, you chose to fight. I chose to defend myself. There's a difference." Thalon regarded her for a long moment. Then he stood, his massive frame filling the room. "Dismissed, cadet. But understand this. You've proven yourself capable. That means expectations will rise. Next time, the stakes will be higher." Mara saluted and left. The corridors were empty as she walked back to her quarters. The Academy operated on a dual-cycle schedule to accommodate species with different circadian rhythms, and most cadets were either in training or resting. She passed a window that overlooked the moon's surface, a barren expanse of silver dust and jagged craters, lit by the distant glow of the Carthan star. She'd come here to prove something, not to the aliens, not to the Council, to herself. Her grandmother had always said, strength isn't about dominating others, it's about knowing your limits and choosing when to push past them. Mara had pushed past hers today, and she'd won. But as she turned a corner, she found her path blocked. A cadet stood in the hallway, a Phalian, their crystalline body refracting light into fractals. Mara recognized them. Zyvan, one of the Academy's top strategists. They'd never spoken before. "Impressive display," Zyvan said, their voice a melodic hum. "I've reviewed the match. Your reaction time is exceptional. Your spatial awareness, impeccable. But it's your restraint that intrigues me most." Mara crossed her arms. "I didn't kill anyone, if that's what you mean." "Precisely. You could have, easily, but you didn't." Zyvan tilted her head, light dancing across her facets. "Why?" "Because winning isn't about breaking your opponent. It's about proving you're better." Zyvan's hum shifted, a note of approval. "I believe we could learn much from each other, Cadet Chen." "Is that an offer?" "An observation, for now." Zyvan stepped aside, gesturing for Mara to pass. "But I suspect our paths will cross again." Mara nodded and continued down the hall. She didn't look back, but she could feel Zyvan's gaze following her. Back in her quarters, she found a message waiting on her console. It was from an unknown sender, the text brief. "They underestimated you. Others won't." She deleted the message without reply. Then she lay down on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come easily. She kept replaying the fight, analyzing every move, every decision. She'd won today, but Thalen was right. Next time would be harder. And somewhere deep down, she welcomed it.
3 days passed. The academy buzzed with rumors. Some cadets avoided Mara entirely, stepping aside when she walked by. Others watched her with newfound respect, or calculation. In the mess hall, she sat alone, as usual, but now the silence around her felt deliberate. No one mocked her. No one dared. On the 4th day, she received a summons. The message came during her tactical analysis class, a holographic projection flashing across her wristcom. "Report to Training Bay 7, immediately." The sender was listed as the Combat Assessment Board. Mara's stomach tightened. The CAB only called cadets for 2 reasons: disciplinary action or advanced placement. She left class without explanation and made her way to Training Bay 7. The facility was one of the Academy's largest, a multi-level complex designed for full-contact simulations. When she arrived, the bay was empty except for a single figure standing at the center: Commander Thalen. "Cadet Chen," he said without preamble, "you've been selected for a special evaluation." "By whom, sir?" "The Council. They want to assess whether humanity's combat capabilities are sustainable in cooperative environments." Thalen's tone was neutral, but Mara caught the edge beneath it. "You'll face a series of opponents. The matches will escalate in difficulty. Your performance will determine whether humanity's probationary status is extended or revoked." Mara's jaw tightened. "So I'm a test case?" "You're a representative. Act accordingly." Before she could respond, the bay's doors hissed open. A squad of cadets entered, 12 this time, from 6 different species. They wore full combat gear, and their expressions were grim. Mara recognized a few from the observation deck during her last fight. None of them looked happy to be here. Thalen stepped back. "You have 10 minutes to prepare. Use them wisely." Mara's pulse kicked up, but her mind sharpened. 12 opponents, full gear. This wasn't a brawl. This was a coordinated strike. She scanned the squad, categorizing them by species and capability. 2 Corinthians for close-range power, 3 Vexori for speed and coordination, 4 Thulicans for brute strength, a pair of Quorum for aerial control, and a single Lyrian. Medics rarely fought, but when they did, they used bioelectric fields. She had no weapons, no armor, just her body, her training, and her wits. The 10 minutes passed in silence, then Thalen's voice echoed through the bay. "Begin." The Quorum struck first, their tendrils crackling as they swooped down. Mara dodged left, grabbed a loose support beam from the bay's equipment rack, and hurled it. The beam clipped one Quorum's core. It shrieked and fell. The second Quorum hesitated, and Mara didn't give it time to recover. She vaulted onto a storage crate, launched herself upward, and tackled it midair. They hit the ground hard. She rolled clear as the Quorum's tendrils spasmed.
The Vexori came next, flanking her in a coordinated V formation. Mara feinted right, then spun left. She caught the lead Vexori's leg, swept it, and used the alien's body as a shield when the others lunged. Claws scraped chitin. The Vexori hissed and scattered, momentarily disoriented. The Thulkins advanced in a wedge, their heavy steps shaking the floor. Mara grabbed a training pike, braced herself, and met the charge head-on. She aimed low, striking joints and knees. One Thulkin went down, another stumbled. She vaulted onto the third's back, wrapped her arm around its neck and squeezed. The Thulkin roared, thrashing, but Mara held on until its knees buckled. The Corinthians attacked together, their forearms a whirlwind of strikes. Mara gave ground, letting them think they had the advantage. Then she stepped inside their reach, too close for their long limbs to be effective. Her elbow struck one's throat, her knee found the other's solar plexus. Both went down gasping. The Lyrian floated forward, their wings shimmering. They raised a hand, and Mara felt the air crackle with bioelectric charge. She didn't wait. She grabbed a discarded helmet, hurled it. The Lyrian dodged, but the distraction was enough. Mara closed the distance, grabbed their wrist, and redirected the charge into the ground. The Lyrian collapsed, stunned. The remaining cadets, 2 Vexori and a Thulkin, stood at a distance, watching her with wary eyes. Mara straightened, breathing hard but steady. Blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow. Her knuckles were bruised, but she was still standing. "Anyone else?" she asked. The Thulkin shook his head. The Vexori backed away. Thalen's voice echoed again. "Match concluded. Cadet Chen, report to the observation deck." Mara climbed the stairs, her legs trembling with adrenaline. Thalen waited at the top, his expression unreadable. Behind him, a holographic display showed the match replay, her movements broken down into split-second decisions, calculated strikes, and relentless efficiency. 12 opponents. You neutralized 11. The 12th withdrew. "Should I have chased him down, sir?" Thalen's lips twitched. "No. You demonstrated strategic restraint. The Council will be interested." He paused, then added quietly, "They fear you, Chen. Not you specifically, humanity. They see what you're capable of, and it unsettles them." "Fear isn't respect, sir." "No, but it's a start." Thalen handed her a towel. "Clean yourself up. You have a briefing in an hour." Mara nodded and left. As she walked through the corridors, she felt eyes on her again. But this time the whispers had changed. They weren't mocking. They were uncertain. And in that uncertainty, Mara found something she hadn't expected. Leverage.
The briefing room was smaller than she'd expected. Mara sat alone at a long table, the walls lined with holographic star maps and tactical overlays. Across from her, a panel of council representatives materialized, avatars transmitted from distant worlds, their forms flickering with latency. The lead representative, a Draelith with scales like polished obsidian, spoke first. "Cadet Chen, your recent performances have been exceptional. However, they raise concerns." Mara kept her expression neutral. "Concerns, ma'am?" "Humanity's integration into the Galactic Council depends on cooperation, not dominance. Your victories, while impressive, suggest a species prone to aggression." "I defended myself, ma'am. Both times I was outnumbered. Both times I was challenged." "And both times," the Draelith said, her voice sharp, "you responded with overwhelming force." Another representative, a quorum, its tendrils twitching, added, "We must ask, can humanity coexist peacefully? Or are you by nature conquerors?" Mara's hands clenched under the table. She thought of her grandmother again, of the stories she'd told about old wars, old hatreds, old scars. She thought of Earth's bloody history, the wars, the genocides, the empires built on suffering. She thought of the centuries it had taken for humanity to finally learn to work together. "With respect," Mara said slowly, "you're asking the wrong question. You want to know if we're dangerous. The answer is yes, we are, but so is every species capable of fighting back. What you should be asking is whether we can be trusted." She leaned forward. "And the answer to that is also yes, because we've learned something you might not understand. We've learned that survival isn't about dominating others, it's about protecting what matters." The Draelith's scales rippled. "Protecting, an interesting word. What do you believe humanity is protecting?" "Each other, our home, our future." "And if that future conflicts with ours?" Mara met the Draelith's gaze. "Then we'll find a way to make it work. Because that's what we do. We adapt, we compromise, we survive. But we won't be pushed around. Not by anyone."
The room fell silent. Then the Draelith inclined her head. "Thank you, Cadet Chen. You are dismissed." Mara left the briefing room with a knot in her chest. She'd spoken the truth, but she didn't know if it was enough. The Council saw humanity as a threat, and maybe they were right. Maybe humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too human to fit into their carefully ordered galaxy. But as she walked through the Academy's corridors, she passed a group of cadets huddled around a console. They were watching footage of her match, the one against 12 opponents. One of them, a young Phalian, looked up as she passed. "That was incredible," the Phalian said, their voice full of awe. "How did you do that?" Mara stopped. She thought of the hours spent training, the bruises, the failures, the slow, painful process of learning to turn her body into a weapon. She thought of the discipline it took to hold back, to win without killing, to prove her strength without losing her humanity. "Practice," she said simply. Then she walked on. That night she lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling again. Her console chimed. Another message. Same unknown sender. "You've made your point. Now the real test begins." She didn't delete it this time. She read it twice, then closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opponents, new doubts. But tonight, she let herself rest, because she'd done what she came here to do. She'd proven that one human could stand against the odds and win. What happened next was up to her.
Morning came with an unexpected summons. This time, it wasn't from the Combat Assessment Board or the Council. It was from Commander Thalen himself, marked urgent. Mara dressed quickly and made her way to the commander's office. When she arrived, she found the door open. Thalen stood by the window, his back to her, gazing out at the moon's desolate landscape. "Cadet Chen," he said without turning. "Close the door." She did. Thalen turned to face her, his expression grave. "The Council has made a decision," he said. "Humanity's probationary status will continue. For now." Relief flooded through her, but Thalen raised a hand. "There's more. They've agreed to extend the probation on one condition. You must serve as humanity's representative in the Interspecies Combat Trials." Mara's breath caught. The trials were legendary, a competition held every 5 years where species sent their finest warriors to compete in a series of grueling challenges. Winning meant prestige, alliances, and political leverage. Losing meant humiliation. "I'm honored, sir, but..." "It's not an honor, Chen. It's a test. If you fail, the Council will use it as evidence that humanity isn't ready. If you succeed, you'll have earned humanity a seat at the table, not as probationary members, but as equals." Thalen stepped closer. "Do you understand what I'm asking of you?" "I do, sir." "And you're willing to accept?" Mara thought of her grandmother, of Earth, of every human who'd fought and bled to drag their species out of the dirt and into the stars. She thought of the whispers, the mocking, the fear in the eyes of cadets who saw her as a monster. She thought of the young Thalian who'd looked at her with awe. "Yes, sir," she said. "I'm willing." Thalen nodded slowly. "Then prepare yourself. The trials begin in 6 months. You'll train here, under my supervision. And Chen," his voice softened, "you won't be alone. I'm assigning you a support team, cadets from other species who've expressed interest in working with you." Mara blinked. "Sir?" "You've made an impression, Chen. Not all of it negative." Thalen handed her a datapad. "These are their profiles. Review them. Your first training session starts tomorrow." Mara took the datapad and left. Back in her quarters, she scrolled through the profiles. Zyvan, the Thalian strategist. A Vexori named Rael who'd fought in her second match and later requested a transfer to her unit. A Thulkan engineer named Kor who designed adaptive combat gear. And a Lyrian medic named Scylla who treated her after the 12-on-1 match and later sent her a message. "I've never seen anyone fight like that. Teach me."
Mara stared at the profiles, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. She'd come here expecting isolation. She'd found enemies. But now, impossibly, she'd found something else. Allies. The next 6 months were brutal. Thalen pushed her harder than any instructor she'd ever had. He made her spar against multiple opponents simultaneously, forced her to adapt to zero-gravity environments, and taught her to fight in hazmat suits, underwater, and in blinding sandstorms. Her support team trained alongside her, learning to anticipate her movements, to cover her weaknesses, to amplify her strengths. Zyvan taught her to think 3 steps ahead. Rael showed her Vexori grappling techniques. Kor built her custom gear that adapted to her physiology. Scylla taught her battlefield medicine, how to stabilize a wound, how to keep fighting even when injured. And slowly, grudgingly, the academy began to change. Cadets stopped whispering. They started watching. Some approached her in the mess hall, asking questions. Others challenged her to friendly sparring matches. She won most of them, lost a few, and learned from every fight. When the trials finally arrived, Mara stood at the transport bay alongside her team. Zyvan's crystalline body shimmered with excitement. Rael's scales were polished to a gleam. Kor carried a pack full of gear. Sila's wings fluttered nervously. Commander Thalen approached, his expression unreadable. "Remember, Chen, you're not fighting for yourself. You're fighting for humanity." Mara met his gaze. "No, sir. I'm fighting for all of us. Humans, Phalians, Vixori, Thulkins, Lyrien. We're stronger together." Thalen's lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. "Then go prove it." The transport lifted off, carrying them toward the trials. As the Academy shrank behind them, Mara looked at her team. Aliens who'd once seen her as a threat, now standing beside her as equals. She thought of the young Phalian who'd asked how she did it. She thought of her grandmother's words. Strength isn't about dominating others. It's about knowing when to stand alone and when to stand together. Mara had stood alone in the arena. She'd proven she could win against any odds. But now, surrounded by her team, she realized something. Winning alone was easy. Winning together, that was the real challenge, and she was ready. The transport accelerated, stars streaking past the viewport. The trials awaited, and Mara Chen, once mocked and outnumbered, was ready to show the galaxy what humanity and those who stood with them could truly achieve. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. One Deathworlder could change the odds, but a team of allies could change the galaxy.